other thing that Trust Lab is responsible for is doing events like this. And again, we want to thank Mercantile Bank as the title sponsor of this event. Kyle will be introduced shortly. He's responsible for pulling together the speakers today. And we're excited to have you here. I hope you all got enough to eat. Please help yourself again. And at this point, I'd like to introduce Rachel.
All right, thank you. As Jeff mentioned, I manage our educational foundation here at the BBB, and Trust Lab is one of our programs through the foundation. So I'm going to introduce our panelists today, and then we'll have a few questions to get us started, but then we'll open it up to all of you to ask questions that you might have for the panelists today too. So first we have Kyle. Kyle Cunning is Senior Vice President at Mercantile Bank of Michigan, whose principal responsibility is information security as the Information Security Officer for the bank. Kyle has over 25 years of experience in bank operations, of which IT, security, and business continuity have been a primary focus. During his banking career, Kyle's been tasked with managing the bank's information technology assets, network design, maintaining disaster recovery and business continuity programs, oversight and management of strategic vendor relationships, and maintaining the information security and incident response programs. So thank you, Kyle, for being here today. And next we have John High. John is Chief Operating Officer for Trivalent Group, Michigan's leader in managed services, cloud, cybersecurity, and managed networks. At Trivalent, John provides management of daily operations, strategic leadership, visioning while driving continuous improvement, deeply passionate about culture, quality of service, and community leadership. John vigorously pursues Trivalent's successful standing in each. John's specific areas of expertise in business, coupled with technical acumen around business continuity, practical security, and IT infrastructure, make him unique in the marketplace. Thank you, John, for being here. And third, we have Jim Huttenlocker. Jim is a graduate of the University of Michigan Business School. After a career in commercial lending, Jim joined the Huttenlocker Group agency to produce and service large, complex property and casualty clients. Jim spends the majority of his day interacting with the agency's diverse commercial clientele, but also manages a team of 30 sales professional colleagues. In 2016, the Huttenlocker Group partnered with Acrisure, a global insurance brokerage firm. Jim and his firm now manage 6 locations in Metro Detroit, including 125 employees. Acrisure is headquartered in Grand Rapids and has become the fastest growing agency group in the nation, including over 300 agency partner locations in the United States and globally. Jim spends much of his time advising clients on various risks, including cyber liability insurance. He has experience underwriting, placing coverage, and adjusting cyber losses. Thank you, Jim. Okay, so first we'll get started, and Kyle, if you want to start from your perspective, what do you feel are the greatest cyber threats all of our attendees should know about facing businesses in 2019?
Well, I'll take the one that I see most happening the most from a banking perspective, and then the rest of the speakers may have some other ones that they would add on to that. But the biggest one that I see impacting businesses today is fraud through the email channel. So what do I mean by that is you can call it business email compromise, but essentially it looks something like this. It's an email is received by somebody within your organization, whether it's coming from a vendor or supposedly coming from a vendor or coming from your CEO or CFO or that sort of thing. And essentially there's payment instructions being requested to be either changed, like in the vendor situation, that hey, our bank account changed. And unfortunately the email is being trusted as it's legitimate, right? And that's where we see from a banking perspective, customers are sending legitimate funds to the bad guys because they think they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, following the CFO's instructions or following the vendor's instructions. And unfortunately, we need to change our way of thinking around email, and processes need to stop starting with the email and ending with the email, and just simply trusting that it is truly from Kyle, because nowadays it could be truly from Kyle's inbox, it could truly be from that email, but it's not coming from me, sort of thing. So that's what I see as one of the biggest cyber threats facing businesses today.
you think in your mind?
I'm gonna build on Kyle's answer, and I'm gonna answer it in a way that might get your attention and you walk away remembering this. You are the biggest problem. The main threat vectors that exist, whether it's a phishing email, social engineering, whatever else, more times than not, this is not just a system compromise, it's a person compromise. Your propensity to trust, whatever else, whether it's a phishing message or whatever, is what gets companies in trouble. I've talked to companies that they spent millions of dollars on protecting themselves. One person can open an attachment and it's all down the toilet. So in that respect, fortifying yourself and boldening your understanding of what to do and what not to do will alleviate the biggest threats. But the human element is the biggest threat, I think.
I'll just add on to that. I used to, I sell cyber insurance. I'm the doom and gloom guy in the crowd. So I'm the undertaker. Everything's gonna blow up. You're gonna have a car accident today. Fire's gonna happen. That's how I sell insurance, right? So bad things are gonna happen. Truly in cyber, bad things are gonna happen. I used to sell cyber insurance by saying, hey, who does website commerce? Who does internet banking? Who has this huge presence on the web? And that's how I used to say, you've got a cyber risk. Now I truthfully tell clients, do you have money? If you have money and you have a checking account, you have a cyber risk, and you really need to consider mitigating that cyber risk with folks like this that are gonna do it on the front end, and then folks like me that sell some insurance to hopefully, if you do have a cyber breach or the social engineering that Kyle talked about where money goes out the door, you've got some recourse back to an insurance company. So I will tell you, I agree that it's usually, that's a person issue, it's not a breach issue that opens up you to those issues, and it's a trust factor. We'll go through some examples today of just, if I could put a stupidity exclusion in an insurance policy, I would never pay a claim. There's always an error of some sort in any type of insurance claim, be it work comp, property, whatever. Definitely in cyber liability, there was an error made by an individual that allows that money or that data to go out the door. So we'll talk about that throughout today, but I think that's definitely it's the human aspect.
So starting on that preventative front, I'm sure many of our attendees have employees at their business that either they're directly or indirectly supervising, managing. What are maybe some basic ways that they can get the word out to their employees on the preventative front to prevent some of that email compromise?
Yeah, I think education is one of the big keys, right? So awareness helps for sure as a starting basis, but some of you may have picked up, or I saw some being handed out from the Mercantile folder. In there, I put together a sample policy that you can create it, call it a standard guideline, whatever you want to do with that. But I started to try to fashion in there some of the things that you can do as a business. And I think number one is recognizing the fact that there's processes within your organization that start with an email, and that may be okay, but you need to assess what is it that email is asking me to do, and then start to decide, do we just trust that email is okay or not? So, for example, if a CEO or CFO or whoever in your organization says, hey, send 100,000 to this vendor, it's a known vendor to you. There's no change to payment instructions. It's just simply we have to pay him $100 grand. Here's the invoice or whatever to do that. Is that a high risk situation? Do you guys think? Does anybody think that's high risk?
Yes.
It's generally not, because the payment instructions haven't changed. So if it's somebody you've already paid, the 100,000, if they sent 100,000 to the company and it wasn't really intended, or shouldn't have gone there, you probably could get it back if you have a good relationship with that vendor, right? The riskiest one is when they're asking for the bank account information to change, okay? So, we talk about the CFO, we talk about the vendor instructions. How about when your HR area receives a instruction from your employee saying, hey, I changed banks. Can you change my direct deposit information? Do you think that ever gets fished? Definitely does. And I've got examples of CEOs who didn't get their paycheck. And as Jim said, an error was made in some of these organizations. The next point I'm going to lead to when it comes to solving this issue is some of you are probably sitting here and maybe the leaders of your organization, the owners, you need to empower your staff to not do something if they don't feel comfortable that it's not truly you, sort of thing. Create the steps. That whole policy is about creating the environment that allows that you follow these steps, you're going to be safe, right? And we know that this is going to keep us from losing money. If I'm supposedly pressuring you not to follow these, then you have every right to not send that payment out until you are comfortable that you have to give them that capability, because the bad guys are going to, social engineering tactic number one, right, is build trust. Number two, if you can't do that, pressure, right? It's always urgent. It's got to be done today. We're going to lose this $1 million deal if you don't send that wire, that sort of thing. So make sure your staff is equipped to be able to do those types of things. And then on the payroll one, the example that I had, the policy and procedure for that organization was in place, but because the person requesting it, supposedly, right, was somebody of a high stature, the office person thought, I'm not going to inconvenience them by asking them to take this additional step that they're supposed to do with this. I'm just going to do this for them, right? So procedure wasn't actually truly followed in that situation, and next thing you know, the CEO's check was going somewhere else. So think of all those different areas within your organization that I just gave you a couple examples, but there might be others to where I don't know all of your businesses where you might receive something via email, and you got to think about what is the risk if this email is not really legitimate. John?
So, hopefully we'll come back to, so what Kyle's giving you about policy, it sounds kind of like, boring. It's gold. Okay, so we need to come back and expand on that. But, so let me give you a scenario. In the scenario I'm going to give you, there's tools, all kinds of tools out there that do this. Okay, so the initial question was on awareness, getting the word out and everything else. So picture this, you own a company, you upload all the email addresses of your employees into this tool, okay? And then at some time that you don't know exactly when, it sends out a fake phishing message. Now there's categories of complexity. There's the all caps Nigerian prince, we can all pick that one out now, right? That one's done, don't send him money. Or there's the category 5, it's like really like current events, hard to do. I mean, it would trip up a lot of us. So you send out a phishing message, a fake phishing message, maybe category 3. Everyone gets it, and guess what happens? People are gonna fall for it. So they click on the link and they open the attachment, but instead of something bad happening, they get a Rick Astley music video. It's like, I should have done that, right? So that's a thing. It's called Rick Rolled. I didn't know that. So what happens is then you get a report and said, okay, we sent a campaign out. 50 people got the message. 14 clicked on it. Well, that's no good. So what you do is you prescribe video-based training, like here's how you recognize. Don't hover over the links and don't open attachments and all this kind of stuff. And then they have to pass a little quiz at the end, and then you get a report later on, hey, all 14 took the training, passed it, aha. So then a month later, you run another campaign, and hopefully less than 14 clicked on it this time. That scenario is abundantly available to you. There's tools all over the place, about $20 per user per year. You can do that. That's the best way going right now in the marketplace, as opposed to someone in the company bringing pizzas in and doing a lunch learning session. These are much better.
So how do you know the fake phishing site is not a real phishing site?
So, yeah, well, good question, right? So that's, and the thing is what happens, we all get phishing emails. I don't want to say legit phishing emails, but we get like real phishing emails all the time. And this will get kind of mixed in there. That's part of the science of it, is like you're not supposed to fall for either one.
No, how do we pick a site that is truly doing training as opposed to?
No, the tool does it. The tool does it.
Yeah.
How do you choose the tool?
How do you trust the tool?
Because they're out there and they're trustworthy, and companies like us work with them. I don't want
Vetted through you guys like this.
I don't want to be selling, but that's kind of what it is. There's companies out there that's what they do. In fact, they build a library of templates. They monitor current events, and they'll come up with templates like, did you know the caravan at the border? It's like a news flash or something like that. So there's trustworthy companies that take that off your plate. You don't have to worry about it.
I'm a user of the system, a type of system that John is talking about. So it's a solution that you utilize, right? So
Right.
you're gonna go into it, you're gonna choose what campaign, they have sample campaigns, but you can create your own based on something maybe you've seen or that you've read. And so maybe you find a campaign that's similar enough, but then you tweak it to match what you've seen. And then you say, okay, send it to all these people. And you could send it to everybody, you could slice and dice it however you want to. And so they have registered like the email addresses, or if there's a link that they're gonna click. Sometimes when they click the link in the email, it actually brings them to like the web page, and the web page is saying, hey, you've been just fished or rickrolled or whatever, right? So they get that instant, but there's also usually a tool within your email, like a button, specific button to report it, right? And so if they report it, hey, this is phishing, if it's one of your tests, it'll say, hey, great job, you know, this was a test that the organization did. If it's not, they still get a great job. You're playing an active role of being a part of the organization's security. Because that's the reality is, you know, just to twist what John said early on is, you know, as much as you are the target, you are also a part of the security.
Right.
The human element can also help protect the organization. So it's a great tool to help continue to build that awareness, because one thing that we didn't mention as a risk, okay, we've been focused on payment fraud a little bit with the email, and email is a very central piece to all this, and us as the human element. But say they click on that link and it's not a test, and next thing you know, all of your computers in your organization now start getting locked up with encryption. And you get the ransom note that says, hey, you gotta pay the ransom to get the key to unencrypt your systems. You know, to me, that was one of the biggest things. If you go back to question number one, that would be the second thing that I would mention is ransomware. Is something that you need to be aware of and that you need to be working on. Your organization needs to have backups and the ability to save yourself if that should happen to your organization. I don't, again, know your businesses, but if all your computers got locked up, even down to the machine on the floor that's punching out parts, to where it's locked up and they can't do what it's supposed to be doing, what kind of impact is that to your business for a day, for 2 days, a week, if it's not producing parts or the service, whatever you offer as a service, you can't do. So, you know, there's more than just this, the emails of fraud. When you think of phishing, it's a training on that aspect is huge. The number one other thing that I see when it comes to this phishing piece of it is they're phishing for credentials. So a lot of what I see hit our own organization is a lot of it's click this attachment to go, you know, get this information that somebody's trying to send you. And there's no malware associated with this attack at all, right? All it is when you go to it, when we see it open in the sandbox, sandbox is just a tool that does what an end user would do, click the link and just lets things happen. And it basically reports, it shows you, I can get a report that shows me exactly what happened if the end user had done this. It brings them to a website, and the website looks exactly like, John, do you know the answer? What does it exactly look like? Whose site?
Oh yeah, it's a forged site.
It's a forged site,
Yeah.
and it's generally Microsoft Office 365.
Oh yeah.
So I'm going down a little bit of a path here, but Office 365, why would they want those credentials?
Username and password.
Username and password.
Usually the same as your local Active Directory password. You know.
So if you have migrated your business to now have your Exchange server or your mail, I'm picking on Microsoft, but I mean this could be any online-based email, right? Office 365 credentials. Person puts it in, doesn't work. Huh? They click the link again. They put the credentials in again. Maybe 2-3 times they try it. Well, the bad guys have captured those credentials. If the organization has not added multi-factor authentication, does everybody know what I mean when I say that? You get a text to your phone or something, right? Something out of band, something more than just simply username and password. What businesses' mistakes are is that they're not adding that layer when they go to Office 365. And unfortunately, whoever helped them go there are not doing that as well. So you need to either have certificates, or that multi-factor authentication step is very beneficial, because if your end user gets phished successfully, the bad guys can get to that website anywhere. When that Exchange server, that mail server was in your four walls, the only way you could get to that was either you were in your organization, or maybe people had remote access. And a lot of people who have remote access into a business these days, usually there's multi-factor authentication. So you gotta think of it the same way. You've now taken your mail and you've put it out on the web. It can be accessed anywhere in the world. It's no different than when you offer remote access into your own business network. You wanna have that same type of authentication. The multi-factor step is necessary, because if the credentials are phished successfully, now they're in there. So we'll get into more of that. There's some examples in your the handout of the pamphlet that are my binder that I gave out. If you don't have one, they were on the back. But
So
look in there.
let me just jump in here, because I see everybody going, holy crap, I'm just gonna shut my business down right now because we can't do this. So you can fix these issues.
Yep.
There are ways to do this. So the first issue we brought up was the whole banking, losing money by sending money out by being duped. That's called social engineering. One thing that you guys should all do when you go back to your office this afternoon is talk to your accounting department and your accounts payable departments. Talk to those folks about one simple topic. If you learn anything today, go back and ask them about callbacks. So when they get the email from a vendor, from a bank, from anybody out there saying, hey, we're a normal vendor of yours, you send us money every month or every week or every whatever, we buy from you all the time, but we're gonna change our banking accounts this time, so please send the money where it used to go to this bank account, now it's to Nigeria and it's going somewhere else, but we don't know that. Call back. Make sure you're calling back and talking to a human. The millennials out there don't wanna call anybody, right? So they all wanna text and they all wanna email, and they believe that everything that happens on the internet is accurate. You gotta have a physical callback. The other thing you gotta let people know is don't call back the number that they put on their email. Duh, but don't call back that number, because that's going to Nigeria and somebody's gonna answer the phone. Hutton Locker Group, how can I help you? And yeah, we changed our banking account, go ahead and do it. All good to go, send the money. That happens all the time. So if there's anything out of the first situation we talked about, the social engineering, it's the callback provision. Let me give you a real life example. A small contractor of mine, client of mine, home builder, 30 people in the office, CFO, owner, and maybe one accounts payable clerk in the office. They get email from their law firm. Their law firm is accurate. It goes to the owner, just like it would go to me all the time, saying, hey, here's our invoice for last month, $24,000. And oh, by the way, we changed our banking accounts. We're now from Chase over to Mercantile. Great bank, we're going to Mercantile, so we're moving over there.
The bad guys do not bank.
Bad example. So the law firm was the one that was hacked, right? So it's a bad email, but it goes to the owner. The owner gets the email, like I get invoices all the time. I send it to my CFO and say, yep, we had services, because they hacked the law firm. They know that we had services and the number looks about right. Go ahead and pay it. CFO gets it from the owner thinking, hey, this is validated, and it says, change my banking account over here, send the money out the door. This happened 6 weeks ago to one of my little contractors. $24,000 went out the door and it's gone. Now, a reminder, I tried to sell them cyber liability insurance a year ago. They said, oh, we don't do internet commerce, we don't do any of these type of things. And that's where I changed my topic of, hey guys, do you have cash? You need to have cyber liability insurance, because that would have paid that claim for them. But that's a simple example. When you go back to your firms this afternoon, talk to your accounting folks and talk to your accounts payable people about that callback provision. That's probably the single easiest thing before you really dive into some of the other stuff we were talking about. Just make sure you're calling back and getting somebody on the phone that you verify that the wire transfer information change is accurate.
It's probably a
wire
good,
or ACH.
Yeah,
It's
correct.
Any payment.
this is a good time just to make sure your mindset is right, okay? So there's an axiom that I have in a presentation I do. It's security is not convenient. And and I've yet to find a case since 2003 when I came across that that's the case. Someone will come tomorrow, security is not convenient. If something is easier for you, you're gonna sacrifice security. So multi-factor that Kyle mentioned, it sounds like another thing, another layer. Toughen up, Buttercup. Because within a few years, that's gonna be the norm. When I log into my this morning, it hit me. I put in my username and my password, and it says, "Hey, I sent a request to your token, my phone. Can you approve or deny?" I had to authenticate my phone, approve it, and log in, and then the login proceeds. So that kind of extra factor, just get used to it. Just figure on your days of a username and password are dying. Within a few years, this will be your norm. But bear in mind that you live in a world that you're abiding by security already, and you probably don't even know it. When you pull up to a gas pump, you go line up to get gas, there's those yellow columns by the gas pumps. And what are they called?
Bollards.
Yes, bollards. Wow.
Give
No one knows.
Give him a cookie.
No one ever knows that.
That's impressive.
That's a business card. No one ever knows that. You should have like a PIN number or a fingerprint scan on your phone. Shame on you if you don't, but you should. All right. So what did you do when you left the house this morning? You probably locked your door. So you're doing these things already, whether you realize it or not. When you go to buy from Amazon, they don't let you look at the whole database unfiltered and just get whatever you want and manipulate the database. You have to go through an interface and buy what you want. So these are security measures that we live within every day, and the multi-factor is something that you just better just bank on it and be doing it.
Another thing to check.
I think we'll open it up if there's other particular questions from the audience. Has this sparked any questions for any of you?
One.
Yeah.
You mentioned the, sorry, I was taking a phone note to make sure I remember the question. But,
Does he have passwords on his phone?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
No, you were talking about categories of phishing scams. So category 1 was the Nigerian prince. Category 5 looks
Yeah.
super legit.
Yeah.
Is there like a standard for that? And if so, where might we find that?
It's not like a universal standard. That's this company's standards.
Okay.
So
it's just one provider sort of stratifying.
They're basically just trying to say, how sophisticated is this test of
Sure.
your staff, so, you could start out with a level 1 and you'd hope that everybody would catch it, right, the Nigerian prince, and then as you work up, let's say you get really good at the category 3 kind of attempt of fish, people are
Right.
picking that up pretty easy, maybe you step up your game and you start to make it a little more sophisticated.
Well, it seems like for some businesses it may be valuable just to make people aware that there are multiple layers of these things. Right?
Yes.
So it's not a if either or, but both and, right? It's
Right.
this and this
Right.
and this and this, and they get progressively more
Right.
sophisticated.
And I think as part of that awareness training is
Aware of that.
for people to understand what are the risks, right? And we talked about 2 major risks today for you as an organization, right? It could involve funds, and we talked about cash. We haven't talked about what if your environment is actually truly compromised to where they steal data from you. I mean, do you have intellectual property you don't want lost, right? That would be a risk. You have non-public information that every business does, right? You have employees, you have their data, you have their W-2s. One of the things in the folder that I put in there was from the IRS. This time of year, great time of year, where they're always trying to get you to get your staff to email the W-2s because the CEO is asking for everybody's W-2 because like they do that every year. And if they attach it and send it, it's not going to the CEO, it's going to the bad guys, and then fraudulent tax returns happen, right? So there's so many different things out there that's of value, and I think that's probably one of the first steps that people struggle with is thinking that I don't have anything. I've heard business owners say that. It's like, I create vacuums. I mean, what do I have that the bad guys would want?
Let me just give a real easy example. So I see them all over the place, the speedy print places, you go in and do your copies, but they'll also make the signs and the banners for you. I had a small little one of those, you know, it's a 3-person shop, and they got hacked, and they hacked into their sign printer in the back, you know, big $60,000 piece of equipment in the back, but that was their business. They were making signs and banners. They wanted $8,000 Bitcoin. They don't cash, they want Bitcoin. And they shut them down for a week and said, until you, and this is a small little company, they do, you know, a couple $100,000 a year in revenue, but it was a big number for them, and it was a bigger pain in the rear end to go figure out how to get Bitcoin and pay this money off versus actually trying to figure out what was going on. So the guy paid the money on the Bitcoin to be able to get his printer back. Small little example, but going back to the conversation of, it doesn't mean that you have to have oodles and oodles of data that they're going after. They're going after a quick hit, quick money, and they move on to somebody else. If you make yourself difficult, they move on to the next guy that's a lot easier.
So part of it is analyzing your risk, right? What would happen if we were shut down for a week? What would the cost of that be? Or if our employee or customer data was stolen, what would be the cost of that? How might folks here know if their insurance already covers something, or if their bank already covers this? How do they?
Yeah, so I'll jump in that really quickly. The new term out there is cyber liability insurance. Most insurance company, or most people do not buy it currently. In my portfolio, probably 80%, 90% have not purchased cyber liability insurance. It's something that's pretty brand new in the last maybe 5-6 years. So I'll talk to your insurance broker, your insurance agent. It's very readily accessible now, and it's very, very cheap. In the handout that I gave you some examples of anywhere from $1,500 to $5,000 a year, and that's a fairly significantly sized company that you can buy cyber liability insurance. Now, if you're a bank or somebody that has bigger exposures, it's obviously more expensive than that, but very, very cheap for good limits and good coverage. Just make sure you have 3 things in there. Number 1, cyber liability includes your liability to third parties, so you lose other people's data and you get sued for that. Number 2 is you lose your money out of that social engineering piece. Make sure social engineering is included in there. And then the last one is the business interruption that basically says my printer got hacked and I'm down for a week and it's going to repay me the lost revenue. That's part of cyber liability as well. So it's not included in your normal, if you've got a business owner's policy or a policy with Hanover or Travelers, unless you have cyber liability specifically, you do not have coverage for any of the things we just talked about. It's a separate standalone insurance policy that you need to purchase.
Is there anything to watch out for when you're looking at those to where, like, you know, if you're not doing X, Y, and Z,
Correct.
You're gonna, you know, so like you think you're covered, but then when it comes down to it, you're not.
Are you saying
kinda
that there's disappearing insurance policies out there?
Well, I didn't wanna say it. You
Come
did.
on, I give you a good promo on the banking side.
Yeah,
Yes.
the bad guy.
Yeah. So yes, in the past, what I would tell you is you'll have to fill out an application. We're kind of archaic in our business. You still have to fill out an application that says what your current protocols are. My advice to you is don't lie on that. Don't say that you're doing multifaceted authentic passwords and all that kind of stuff, or you've got callback provisions if you truly don't have that. Because if you have a claim, the insurance company can then come back to you and say, well, geez, on your application you said you were doing X, Y, and Z, and if you're not doing that, we're not going to pay the claim over on this side. So be accurate and honest in that policy. There were policies at the beginning when insurance companies really didn't know how to manage this risk, that they would say if you don't do the callback, the policy, the coverage goes away. We're seeing that being removed from insurance policies. So majority of the insurance policies that you see out there are very valid and good insurance policies. They're written by companies you probably don't recognize. You know, the Travelers and Chubbs for the big companies write cyber liability, but you're going to see a lot of things out of Lloyd's of London, Beasley, insurance companies you probably have never heard about that are specialists in the cyber liability space that you'll see.
Great. What about from a bank perspective, Kyle? You know, people think if my personal identity is stolen, I can count on my bank to help me navigate that. What does that look like for a business owner?
Right. So, I mean, we definitely will do what we can to help navigate through that, either from a personal or business standpoint. This maybe leads to the question that I think we have on the list is, what if this does happen to me? You know, what can the bank do for me? The number one thing, as soon as you realize that something's happened like this, call us. Call your financial institution right away, because the quicker that they can get on trying to get that money, stopped and back, it can happen. A lot of times it's gone. If the bad guys, as soon as it hits that account and they know it, they're moving it on, right? It's going to, money mules, and we can talk about that another time. But it gets dispersed and it's gone. But more often than not, and knock on some fiberglass or wood, that lately we've been pretty successful in getting it back. And I think institutions, not like Mercantile, are starting to figure out that they have bad accounts within their environment, and they're getting a little bit better, the bigger banks, at seeing some of these, so that's helping too, that they're slowing the process down because they already suspect that this business account isn't really maybe legit. But again, just get to your bank, find an institution right away when you see that. It's the best thing that you can do. And then from there, you're probably calling your insurance agent. Would you agree, Jim?
Absolutely.
And then sometimes people will call the actual like FBI, and they also are helpful when it comes to large dollar like wires that are maybe going international. They do have a process and a team that helps work along with the banks to get that money stopped and hopefully get it recovered.
So I assume all three of you would suggest these business owners write up kind of a recovery plan before an attack might happen. What would we do? But what do you suggest is included in that recovery plan?
Yeah, look, I'm a big advocate for business continuity, incident response. So the stats in your industry go back to Hurricane Andrew in the early 90s, that companies that suffer a large calamitous event, it could be a fire, hurricane, cyber breach, whatever else, if you have a large, significant event and you're out for 2 days, 4 days, 6 days, whatever else, the stats are overwhelming. Within 3 years, 2/3 of you are gone. You're not in business. So roll the dice if you want, but basically you should have an incident response plan and a business continuity plan. They can be first cousins, but basically you're going to detail out what are your critical assets, how important are they to the business, how long can they be down or unavailable, and how much data can you lose from them if you're without them, and then how do you recover them? Well, I've got offsite backup, I'm just going to restore. Okay, restore on what? Where are you going to get that server from? It's going to go to Best Buy and get it? No, you're not. Who's going to build it? Don't know. Who's going to do the restore? These are all the devilish details that you need to have nailed down and documented in your plan if you want to get out of the soup.
Yep. In addition to that, what I would add on to what John just said is testing it.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
writing is one thing, but then actually exercising it, whether it's from an incident response, and I'm glad that you kind of put those as close cousins, because I think today there's a greater likelihood that you're going to have an incident that's going to impact your organization from a DRBCP standpoint, disaster recovery standpoint, that might come from a cyber event related kind of event than necessarily a tornado ripping through here, or in Michigan we don't really have earthquakes and that kind of stuff. So we just went through a polar vortex and so ice and tornado is probably one of the bigger natural disasters that could impact your organization, but cyber is probably ahead of all of those. So definitely having it and exercising it is the next thing. So that proves, the exercise proves that you can do it. You learn what works, what didn't work. We thought we had a good backup, but when we tried to restore that backup, some things went terribly wrong, and you figure out why. So that's definitely a big part of it.
So two things. I agree 100% with everything that was just said. The other thing that is another duh moment. So you put this fantastic cyber liability breach protocol in place, and where do you store it? On your computer. Print the darn thing out. That's the one thing I tell you. Go back to paper, because I just had a situation with one of my large clients had a breach, and he was calling me on his cell phone because their phones were down, their entire system was down, and they couldn't access their disaster recovery plan because it was on their computer. And luckily they had sent me a copy of it a year ago, so I literally sent him back a copy of his own disaster recovery plan to his mobile device, and he was running around the computer looking at his protocols. Seriously, I mean, that stuff happens. The other thing that happens, or that's good, if you do purchase a cyber liability policy, number one, there's a 1-800 get out of jail free card in the cyber liability policy that I also recommend printing, don't have it on your computer. And they usually have a breach coach that gives you some immediate access. This is probably not gonna happen on a Wednesday at 2 o'clock. It's gonna happen Friday night at 6:30 p.m. and you've got the entire weekend of your systems being down. So they've got 24/7 red label protocols that you can call someone immediately and get some help over the weekend of a breach coach that's gonna tell you who to call, what to do, and also how you need to start the process of recovery. So the insurance policy has some 24/7 recovery stuff as well. And then folks like this obviously are on call as well.
And are there some protocols recommended if customer or, employee personal information is breached, credit card numbers, social security numbers, that kind of stuff? Do you notify those people right away? Is there someone else you should tell before you notify customers? We see huge companies that this happens to, so I imagine it happens to little guys too.
Not sure how to take your question, but I mean, if you as an owner or organization realize that somebody got into your systems, obviously your duty is to your staff. And if that happened to be like you were doing your payroll, not with us, but with like Paychecks or somebody like that, and they had something happen, as a vendor, you're gonna get notified that, hey, we had this issue. They're notifying you, you need to notify your employees, and hopefully they're doing something or helping you with, what are the steps you can take. Obviously the steps from a individual and even a business standpoint is, just kind of your normal top of mind things. Make sure you're monitoring your accounts, what's going on in your accounts on a daily basis, personal or business, balancing your account statements, that sort of thing. Or if you're like me, you look at your account every day and yep, those transactions are mine. You don't worry, the balance is mine because the transactions are mine, sort of thing. But if you see something that's amiss, that's not accurate, then definitely contact your institution. The FTC has a lot of information out there for especially like even consumers on if this happens to you, here's the laundry list of things that you can do. But normally with any breach, the things that they tell you to do is, monitor your accounts, notify your bank right away if you see something fishy. If you want to, you could put, credit holds on. With the fact that one of the big three got hacked, the nice thing is that it's getting easier to where you could put a freeze on all of your accounts and so that nobody can apply for anything as you, and then remove that freeze. But in that's free and that they can't charge you. So there's all these things of pulling your credit, and a lot of times they'll offer free credit monitoring for a year or something like that. So that's kind of the standard fare. Jim, you probably see some of that too.
Well, you also
As far
have
as
federal,
operations.
you have some federal notifications that have to go out if you do have a breach and you lose PII, or personal information.
Timing wise, right?
Correct. You have to hire an attorney and send out legal notifications, which could include free credit monitoring for the breached person as well. So there's a lot of not only proper things to do, but also legal things you need to do if you do lose a ton of information.
If you're a private organization, relatively small, it's not as bad. I mean, you don't want to be him if there's a breach. So I'll give you a quick scenario. This happened in GR, a law firm client. On February 29th, they got breached with ransomware. And they have we don't negotiate with terrorist policy, but they had a good backup. So we're going to restore from backup. Well, that's all good and fine. But it took 4 days of December 29th, 30th, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day of restoring data. And then sneaker netting around and scanning all the computers, 150 of them, to make sure they're clean. Now, they probably could have paid 20 grand and been out of the soup in a day, because there is some honor among thieves, believe it or not. But, so the reason they got breached was this. the sysadmin there created a temporary admin account and he put a weak 7-character password on it because it was gonna use for like 2 weeks for a laptop rollout. And he misconfigured his server to see the internet. Those two things, the server was compromised because it saw the internet, the password was brute forced or guessed because it was weak. So is that a system breach or a person breach? It's a person breach. He did it wrong, right? So the point is that once the breach happened and they restored all the data, they came back, they engaged their insurance company, it was someone else, sorry. Beasley was a carrier. But, so that insurance company forced a forensic investigation. And that forensic investigation found, you know what? No real chance that client data was leaked out. So guess what they're not gonna do? They're not gonna tell anybody that they were breached. And this stuff happens all the time. You don't read about it anymore. 5 years ago, the hospital network in Washington State and Target, and it's like, well, it got breached. You don't even hear about it anymore because if they don't have to tell you, they won't.
Right.
But if something did get leaked, they have a moral and sometimes a legal obligation to tell you within 48 hours or something like that. And if you can manage to not have something leak, don't tell anyone if you don't have to. Reputation damage is huge.
You, it's been mentioned a couple times now about ransomware in one of our questions here. If you're hit by ransomware, what do you do? Do you pay the amount? Who do you contact? How do you go about handling that?
So law enforcement, you work with Don? Witt? Yeah. So Don Witt is the local cyber agent with the FBI. They know how this works. They would rather you not line the pockets of a bad actor. Okay, don't negotiate with terrorists. They don't fund their business, but they also know you have a business to run. Because I told you, if you're out of business, not working for multiple days, and this is gonna come back and get you. So they know that, look, if you gotta pay it, pay it. Because, I mean, don't hold me to this, but there is usually some honor among thieves. If you pay it, that person wants to get in and get their money and get out on to the next one. They're probably not gonna come back to you unless you're really negligent in your countermeasures after this. They would prefer you don't pay, but pay if you must. But certainly call your insurance, call your lawyer. Law enforcement, Kyle mentioned. So the FBI, if you cross state lines, and right now their number is like $250,000. If you're above that water line with how much this breach cost you, they'll pay attention. Otherwise, you go to ic3.gov and you log a complaint, and it goes on this massive beanstalk pile of other complaints just like it to get it filtered whenever. So that's kind of the reality that we live with now. There's so many complaints out there.
What other questions? Yeah.
I'm curious, Jim, in your line of work or your industry in general, do you see greater problem with customers suffering data breach or financial loss? And does that vary somewhat by size of the organization?
What I've seen and across, I'm small business all the way up to large corporate, 75 to 80% of what I see is money. They're in for the quick hit, the money. They still might be stealing the data behind the scenes. I'm not sure how they're monetizing that and coming back. They're stealing that and they're selling that somewhere on the dark web, and maybe you find out about that a couple years later, but they're not coming back to you for the money. So the money is either the first example where we're stealing the money directly out of a wire or an ACH transfer, and the second one would be the ransomware. I'm shutting down part of your computer, your office, or your machinery, and trying to get some ransom coming back. It all comes back to money. Again, going back, they're thieves, and the only way you can monetize that is to get money out of you. So they're coming in from those two scenarios. I'm very concerned about the data breach though, because that is worth a ton of money on the dark web somewhere. My personal experience on my portfolio is I have not seen that. I'm not gonna fake wood as well, but I've not seen that being the issue right now because I haven't seen it monetized. Would you agree on your side as well? What you see? Okay.
Yeah, it's hard to prove. I mean, once that data's lost, unless it leads to, you know, where it came from. Once it hits the dark web, I mean, it's just whatever, you know, whether it's social security numbers and bank account kind of information, or credit card, debit card information, or protected health information. Believe it or not, protected health information is worth more money on the dark web than it is credit cards.
Anyone know what a credit card number costs you on the dark web? Average?
$15.
3. Yeah, PHI is like 25%. Then it's more.
Significantly.
So we're not talking big dollars either. What I'm seeing is they're asking for 25 grand, 10 grand, you know, the little speedy printer guy was 8 grand. It's quick. They want to get in and get out because they don't want to get to the 250 range, because then the FBI comes knocking on the door. So, hey, we had the breach. We caught it before we spent the 10 grand or lost the 10 grand, but now everybody's going willy-nilly around the office and we're going to hire folks to come in. Those costs are pretty significant. They can be covered by an insurance policy. They may not be covered by an insurance policy, but that's the real dollars and cents for companies of your size, that you might have to go out and spend $50, $60, $100,000 to do a forensic audit of your company to make sure this doesn't happen again.
When we start talking about ransomware, or those types of breaches, one thing that I want to share with you guys from an awareness standpoint, that sometimes the ransomware is just a cover. They come in and they've gleaned whatever they want to glean out of your organization, and then they hit you with ransomware. So, you know, they already took what they wanted, and they're trying to cover their tracks by encrypting your environment and then charging you a ransom on top of that. So, denial of service is another thing. Does everybody know what that is? Denial of service. I don't know, if your organization's on the internet and then all of a sudden you can't do anything because they're just flooding you. Of course, we see that from an online banking standpoint, where that can happen, and quite often a lot of times there's, from our vendor's perspective, there's something else going on. When they find, so we use a vendor, right, and they've got multiple banks across the country, and from their point of view, when that happens, there's something that the bad guys have done, and they're just trying to say, hey, oh, look at this over here, you got this denial of service text, so you're focused over here, you don't realize they're doing something or already did something over here then. So I just share that as just an awareness kind of thing, that, you know, when a disaster hits like that, don't just focus on just the one piece of it. Just realize that there might be more going on underneath the covers. That's my only point to share with that.
We have time for a
Oh,
couple
we
more.
got a hand back
Oh,
there.
yeah.
How much of the vulnerability is non-updated software, or just not having your basic virus and malware protection?
Lot. So it was only a number of years ago where patches used to fix stuff. They're used to, like, hey, this feature got added, or, you know, that highlight that didn't work in Microsoft Word, we fixed that. I read an article last week. So Microsoft, they take all their patches and they push them out on the second Tuesday of every month, call it Patch Tuesday. Okay? Last week alone, Microsoft had 70 security fixes in Patch Tuesday. That was just February 12th. You know, who knows, you know, what it was in January or whatever else. So patch is not being patched, and so when you hear people harp upon, oh, you're still on Windows 7, well, Microsoft quit updating Windows 7 and it's going to go out of support in January of 20, and the reason that's important is because it's not impervious to the threats that came out 6 months ago, and Microsoft's not writing patches for them. So you have to stay current on patches, software versions. I mean, it's not just how IT companies sell you stuff now. It's got to be done. It's a security posture thing.
We have time for one or two more questions.
I do have one. A lot of our salespeople are using iPhones, and we're getting an iCloud-based ERP system that's on the phone. I'm hearing phones are getting hacked. What can you do to protect your phone, and how do you handle that? Does Apple automatically have that, or is it something you need to include?
I'll feel free to chime in. So phones. I would say phones inherently, in iPhones in particular, are inherently a little bit more. I was talking on both sides of my mouth. inherently more secure than a computer is, a Windows laptop or whatever else. Just the inherent OS and the fact that you use an LTE network instead of a Wi-Fi or something like that, there's some inherent advantages to that security posture. It's like it's not as easy to hack. It takes more sophistication to hack. Apple Pay generally is a little bit more secure than whipping out your credit card and scanning it in a point-of-sale system. That said, Apple is a user-friendly company, and user-friendliness is convenience, and usually you sacrifice some security when you do that. So their levels, it's pretty well documented, their levels of encryption and the way they communicate from your phone to a system is not as strong or secure as say other systems that's all they do. So I would say generically, without knowing the details of what you're going to, is look into maybe some third-party systems that you can overlay. Security a lot of times like the batter in a corn dog. It's like baked on after the fact. It's not really part of the design. So at this point, look at something that you can lay over what you're going to with this ERP to make it more secure. I mean, remote communication should be over a VPN to create a secure channel and how it's architected, and you can ask them those pointed security questions. I mean, that's vendor due diligence. Ask Target about their HVAC vendor. That's how they got hacked. So it's okay to put screws to a vendor to find out how secure are you going to keep it.
And they're using the Amazon cloud, and they're telling
that's
us
not
it's
bad.
very secure and you shouldn't have any issue, but it's still, I worry about the device in
Yeah.
general.
So the Amazon cloud's good, and that's very prevalent. But yeah, as far as the device, ask them those questions. Hey, your client piece, or what I use to communicate from the app to the back end. How are you securing that? How are you encrypting those communications?
So one quick question, you said the app was pretty secure, what about an Android? Is there a difference between iPhones and providers? Or
Well,
is it
so
just-
again, this is inherently the Android operating system is more open. Okay, so you're Samsung people, sorry. So you can customize it more. You can jailbreak it more. You can do stuff, but guess what? Because you can do it, so can some 14-year-old in the Ukraine. So it's you sacrifice some inherent security by opening the operating system up a little bit. So the answer might be different from them. Oh, the iOS app is pretty good, and here's why. The Android app, possible.
Good to know. Thank
Let me
you.
just add on to that from a salesperson perspective out on the road. User error. It comes down to a salesperson getting information that shouldn't be sent unsecure, and they're getting it in on their iPhone and sending it out on their iPhone and don't even realize that there was attachment that had a spreadsheet of 9,000 credit card statements or whatever it was on there. I'm always amazed in the insurance world, and I'm sure the bank world, how much you folks send me that you shouldn't be sending me. Financial statements, income statements, I mean, all this type of stuff, tax returns, you're sending me under unsecured email, and I sit there and go, oh my God, I'm legally responsible for that, and then I send it on to wherever it needs to go to the insurance company under secure email. So email would be the other one that I would talk about.
No, what do you mean by secure email?
So you can do what is it,
You can encrypt your emails.
but it's hard to do from an iPhone.
Yeah, it's not built in. It's inherently not built into an app or a phone or whatever. You have to. It's like a service you subscribe to or a system you install. And what it does is it'll recognize key things. It'll recognize the anatomy of a social security number. It'll see dollar signs. It'll recognize some things. So if you forget to encrypt it, and you just send it out anyways, it's going to encrypt it anyways,
Right.
despite you. But you can also force it and say, put in the subject line like -secure-, I think that's ours, and it will encrypt it. And then the person on the other end, they don't see the message. They have to download a little client and open it in a special way to unencrypt it or to decrypt it.
But the problem with that is many of us have that in our work environments.
Yeah.
I don't know of any option to do it on the iPhone. So when you have 300 salespeople out running around sending information off their iPhones back and forth, that's the biggest concern I have on the phone piece. of being able to send that information. It's amazing how much is sent via iPhone and mobile device that is not encrypted that should be encrypted. And then going back to what I said about filling out those applications, you know, on the application for that cyber insurance, yes, I encrypt all my data and all my emails. Do you really? Does your salesperson with an iPhone really encrypt all their data? And the, you know, big bad insurance company might come in and say, hey, I'm not paying that claim because your dumb sales guy sent information across that they should have encrypted and did not. So be careful of the mobile device. Very handy, but very scary.
Thank you. Any final comments, my panelists?
I think just to reiterate what Jim had said, as a summary, as a takeaway, if there's one thing from a banking perspective that I would like you to walk away with, is from a payment standpoint. However those instructions come, whether it's snail mail, asking you to change a vendor account number in information, or it's via email, or it's the CEO or proposed CEO or CFO, anytime that happens, you've got to authenticate that communication is truly legit. And the only way that I know of is what Jim said, is to call that person. If you call your CFO, CEO, or whoever in the office that would be sending you that information, you likely are gonna hear their voice and know that it's them, and they're gonna say, yep, I sent you that. I mean, that's number one way of making sure that this doesn't happen to you.
I would add,
And the other added one is you don't use the information that's provided to you in the communication, whether it's snail mail or email. It's information in your directory for your organization to call the CEO, numbers that you already know, or from accounts payable that you know this is the vendor information that you have. Don't use what's provided to you, because you know the bad guys know that if they can get you to call that, then they're just gonna act as Susie. So that's what I would add, John.
No, I mean, honestly, this could be like 3 hours long, and we would still only scrape the surface of what you should know. Just know that it's not convenient. So if you want to secure yourself, think of something really to muck up the works and what you do. And this is like an iceberg. I mean, the part you see above the surface is not the biggest part.
the last thing I would be is just celebrate the culture of being, don't believe anything you see. So just remember that these hackers are really, really good at what they're doing. They're not only doing email, now they're doing text, they're doing all the things. You know, it's a bunch of 14-year-olds sitting in basements somewhere creating this crazy stuff that really looks real. So in your organizations, I would celebrate anytime someone actually asks a question that says, hey, I'm not sure about this email, I'm not sure about this. You as owners, operators, managers of companies, you need to celebrate and promote that in your office. That, hey, this person, it was a real email and we did change our vendor and this was, but we're gonna celebrate that inside of our office and talk about it. The other thing is everybody is great about going back today and say, hey, we're gonna handle this cyber liability. Tomorrow you forget about it, 2 weeks from now you gotta forget about it. So you've gotta have some sort of plan to continually educate your staff on all the changes throughout the year. You can't just do it one and done. You gotta continue to do it month after month after month, have some sort of communication going out to your staff to make sure that they're not falling for this.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for
Thank
your
you.
time.
Thanks for coming.
If I may, again, thank you for coming, thank you speakers, thank you Mercantile for hosting this. This is the type of thing that we do at the Better Business Bureau, so if you're not accredited as a company, please talk to us. We'd love to have you on board and help us support our mission. A couple of things. We had pushed this out through social media. Okay, Better Business Bureau Serving Western Michigan. It's on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, or we on Instagram. Like it, push it forward, share it if you would please. It's all out there at this point.